Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be back with a special guest and a friend who I've really enjoyed collaborating with. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Navya Adikarla, and I'm so excited to be here today. As an autistic woman of color, I think I faced a lot of challenges navigating the world that often caters to neurotypical norms. Um, but I've also achieved significant milestones, which I am so excited to share about today. And in this conversation, I hope to share my experiences, strategies, and most importantly, insights, which I pray will contribute to a broader understanding of neurodiversity and, the challenges and triumphs of individuals like me. So, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I always learn a lot from you. So I guess the first question on our question list is about, I know you're very passionate about neurodivergent employment and what motivated that passion.
Honestly, it's my lived experiences and the phase that I'm going through right now. As someone fresh out of grad school, navigating this seemingly dreadful space called the job search. I think my own experiences navigating, higher education for that matter, and also navigating employment as a person of color, a female person, an international, person, and an autistic individual, plus this internal drive to contribute to all the communities that I lie in. I think both of these together have been a huge, informed, powerful forces, behind my intention to improve the quality of lives and specifically improve employment opportunities for neurodivergent individuals. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, and what are some professional barriers for neurodivergent individuals that you feel are especially overlooked?
Oh, that's a heavy question. There are so many things that I want to talk about, mostly because I have felt the fear and uncertainty. I am still in that space. I do feel that immense fear, if wondering if I'll ever find a workplace that will truly accept, cherish, and value me for who I am. And I faced numerous barriers and challenges, and going through them myself, I do not want others to face the same hurdles that I did or that I do currently. I believe that every neurodivergent person deserves access to meaningful opportunities, meaningful employment, and especially economic empowerment that is so less talked about. But to me, that was what inclusion in the workplace means. So, one critical barrier that often goes overlooked is the lack of social capital, and the lack of professional networks that many neurodivergent individuals miss out on. We may not have those built-in connections or friendships, or just connections in general to get insider advice or support and job leads. And navigating hidden social rules and expectations in itself is so hard. And speaking in terms of, your professional path or in the workspace, that can be a minefield, just navigating so many things at once. There is so much unwritten and unspoken stuff that we are expected to pick up on. And another major issue I feel is the disclosure dilemma that I've personally gone through. I know a lot of neurodivergent people will relate on this. The stress and the risk assessment that you need to do around if you should disclose, when you should do it, and how you should do it. You know, to share that you're neurodivergent, to share your needs. This, hey, this is what I need to thrive. This is what I need to flourish in this space and contribute truly. I think there's still so much stigma and misunderstanding, um, even in spaces that are seemingly welcoming. And I also highlight that there's a huge need for accommodations that usually clash with business norms, like extra processing time, for example, in a world that demands lightning speed decisions, that can be really tough. And underpinning all of this is a frequent lack of genuine inclusion and genuine psychological safety. And I also feel another major barrier, I say, would be we have very few visible role models of openly neurodivergent professionals in various roles, and it's so hard to aspire to something that you can't see. So there's that lack of visible representation. Um, and that, I think that's a real barrier. I still am struggling to find someone that I can relate to, who probably looks like me or has been through the same journey or a similar journey. And so for me, it's even more harder to like carve my own path because I do not have an example.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a helpful and thorough answer. I definitely uh relate to what you mentioned about how there's often barriers in accessibility, like extra processing speed being viewed as inherently unprofessional, even though it could be the person
Yeah.
taking the time they need to come up with a fantastic answer, or idea. Um, the the next question is, I know from some of our previous conversations that you've developed really creative strategies for coping with the high expectations of professional programs and the social expectations that often come with it, but without sort of fundamentally changing who you are as a neurodivergent individual. And yeah, would you be willing to share a little bit more about that and some of the strategies you've developed?
So I have two answers to this question. Um, Mostly because strategies don't just come up by themselves. You work through your entire life to come up with something that works for you. So the shorter answer is, for me, the key has been staying true to myself and proactively seeking opportunities that align with my natural strengths, interests, and how I think or how I approach, real world stuff. So instead of contorting myself, to fit some arbitrary professional mold, I think I focused more on finding what I like, or finding paths that are a good fit where my skills make sense, but I'm also utilizing my internal drive. That has been my focus, and it's still my focus even now. For example, in my master's program, I deliberately chose projects that excited me, like maybe product design or consulting, or for that matter, a tech ethics research project, which is so unconventional to someone who's doing a management master's. I think those projects really helped me tap into what I wanted to explore, what I knew that I would be inherently happy with, tap into my creativity, the way my mind works, and what I want to do, which is I have this deep concern for doing the right thing, so I picked up projects that mean something to me, even in, subjects that do not seemingly fit me. For example, I've consulted with like leadership platforms because I am so passionate about leaderships. So although consulting seemingly is not something that I would naturally go for, I picked up a project that makes more sense to me. I've also taken up a lot of roles, mostly related to neurodiversity advocacy and inclusion, and I've grabbed opportunities that were accessible to me, to put it in a good way, and it allowed me to practice my skills, to build on them. But I did that in a context where my lived experience is highly relevant. So while I absolutely still face, uncomfortable situations and challenges, I cope up by being just unapologetically myself and aiming my energy towards the spaces where that is a value added. It's not a detriment. So it's about swimming with the current of my authentic self, instead of against it. That's the shorter answer, But the longer answer, which I'm very excited to talk about, is just my journey. I think the last 2 3 years of my life, in very brief. I'll probably have to walk you through why I chose to join a professional program in the first place, why I got into it. So I've recently graduated from the Masters of Engineering Management program from Duke, which is a condensed form of an MBA degree. But my idea initially was to discover who I was. I knew I was a leader, and B school is one, tangible thing or tangible, I guess, step to discovering myself, and that's why I wanted to get into a B school. And this program was a great fit for me, and I'll tell you why. Because it's super short, it's not as dense or as intimidating to me like an MBA degree or something like that. And it's also tailor made for engineers. So I think that was the right fit for me. I had a context. I was an engineer. I am an engineer. So I could use that context to get into this. This is shorter. So, and it's also very condensed and not as intense as you would expect an MBA to be. But I'm still coming out with the skills that I want to build on, with opportunities that I want to make use of. So again, that's probably, if you can pick up some sort of strategy between those lines, I think I would be really glad. Then once I did get into this program, I did move out of my own country, and I took up things that, again, I say really excite me, and I really wanted to learn. It was less about moving to another country or, settling in a profession, and more about who am I and what do I want to be. And that's what I've done. All the projects that I've did, all my internships, all the roles that I've taken up have been very mindful. That have been very like intentional and deliberate. And what that gave me is this differentiator of, hey, this profile is so vivid and everything makes sense, everything is a meaningful experience, everything has had impact both on both on the person and the community that makes use of that project. um, I love strategizing, which is always what I speak about. So when I took up product design, I took it up because I'm a creative person. I'm an artist. I'm a writer, and I really wanted to do product design. And it's also something that comes naturally to me, which is why I complain so much about the way systems are designed. It just makes so much sense to for me to just get into product design. And I took up projects because I took up consulting projects because I love doing research so much and coming back with recommendations. And I also like doing things which are, time boxed, projects that are time boxed, which is what consulting is. It's basically doing research and coming out with strategies or recommendations, but you are in a time box. And there's this opportunity to like jump from one topic to the other topic. I think that's why I love it so much and I took it up. I also, interestingly, I think as I mentioned earlier, took up a tech ethics research project while the rest of my classmates were really busy in corporate internships. I just really wanted to seize that opportunity because I believe I'm gifted in thinking ethically or thinking philosophically, and I really wanted to get into it. I just didn't want to know and sit down. I really wanted to explore, and this was a great time for me to do that. It did take a lot of courage to choose something so unconventional, but I absolutely loved it. It's interdisciplinary. I learned so many other languages because my team had people from policy, from economics, from arts and other sciences, and it's just such a happening space. It just fit me so perfectly, and I'm just really glad I took it up. And the impact, if you ask, is, so whatever findings we've come up with, um, our client or our partner is building on it, and it is going to change the whole landscape of tech ethics and the way emerging tech like AI are going to be governed. To me, I couldn't have made a greater impact than that. At that point of time, with whatever degrees I've had. So, speaking of impact and circling back to why I wanted to be in a B school leadership, I've had several leadership roles, both as a student and as a student worker at my university. And I'm talking about my university because it's the most recent experience I've had. I've coached my own peers, I've mentored my own teams, and I've coordinated so many projects within my departments. I've spoke at various platforms about neuro inclusion, and I still do every chance I get. I love strategizing, so that is what I do when I speak about inclusion. And I'm also constantly trying to influence and advocate for accessibility of all kinds, and most importantly, I think creating belonging for humans in general. And it's just all over my, like, if you just look at my entire journey, I think one thing that I've done constantly is to remain authentic to myself by gravitating towards things that truly inspire me, they motivate me, and I know I light up when I talk about them, and using those as foundation for what kind of impact that I want to do. That's the whole, like, secret to my life, I guess. It's all about leveraging what you have and what you want to do, rather than trying to fit into a mold that is probably not for you at all.
Well, thank you so much for that answer. That makes a lot of sense. And um, I've also definitely like personally had some very intense interests in neurodiversity in particular. And being able to like work within those interests is such a uh, can be such a joyful thing. Um, the next question is, what was your personal experience like accessing a diagnosis? And as a sort of related question, what changes would you like to see to better support neurodivergent students who may not yet realize that they're neurodivergent or may suspect, but aren't completely certain? Um, yeah.
So my diagnostic journey, in double quotes, really began, I think, a long time ago, with this intense need to understand myself and understand why I've always felt so different. I really needed vocabulary to describe myself, not just to, like, the outside world, but to also myself. And I think that drive for self knowledge is what motivated me to, like, move out of the country in the first place and seek a professional program, to just put myself in a different environment so that I can look at myself through different eyes. And I was really lucky that a random conversation online with a stranger just pointed me in this direction of considering neurodivergence. And the term was really new to me, but that set me off on this very extensive independent research process. I would just sit on my laptop all day just trying to figure out what it means. And surprisingly, the more I learned, the more the pieces started to fit together. I felt so seen. And pursuing an official diagnosis was an idea at the back of my head, and it was important to me personally to get that external validation, because I wanted it to be part of my vocabulary. I wanted that external validation. And looking back, I would say I was highly, very extremely privileged to have the resources and the opportunity to persist in finding answers. For neurodivergent individuals without ready access to a diagnosis, we do need widespread change. I cannot stress it enough. And on a societal level, we must increase general awareness and education around what neurodivergence can look like, so that more people can recognize those traits, can search for that vocabulary, maybe within themselves or outside. That said, we also need to make diagnostic services more affordable and more accessible, regardless of someone's location or income level. I know, as I said, I was really highly privileged, and I was just very lucky to be at the right place at the right time with the right kind of resources, to get access to an official diagnosis. But removing the broader societal stigma around neurodivergence is also critical so that people feel safer talking about it. People feel safer just seeking out this vocabulary. People feel safer seeking a diagnosis without fear of judgment or discrimination. And we should provide support and accommodations based on traits. Um, Accommodations is a huge topic, but I think the better approach is to provide support based on traits and lived experiences and not on a diagnostic status. The focus really needs to be on meeting people where they are and meeting their real lived needs, is what I would say.
Yes, absolutely agree with everything you mentioned there. And um, I think that it can kind of go the other way as well, where I know sometimes when people disclose that they're autistic, for example, those around them will, with the best of intentions, but will try and put together every accommodation that they think an autistic person might need, even if it's in some cases the exact opposite of what that person needs. So they might like dim the lights,
Yeah.
anticipating light sensitivity. Person has it like that could be useful, and it's not a bad practice necessarily, but I absolutely agree with your idea of trait-based accommodations. Um, the next question is, what advice would you give to other neurodivergent individuals? And as a kind of related question, if you could travel back in time, what advice or support would you have wanted to provide to yourself when you were younger?
My biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to seek out help. Don't be afraid to seek out environments and opportunities that allow you to thrive as your authentic self. There can be so much pressure to conform and mask. You know, even me, I speak so much about, being yourself and so much about self leadership, but sometimes the pressure can be so intense and it can be like almost tangible, I feel like. But trying to fit in a world that is not built for us comes at a very steep price. I keep saying this. It's like I'm on a bicycle on a highway road that is built for large trucks. There, everywhere I see are trucks and they run so smoothly on the road. And I am bound to hit a truck. I am bound to get into accidents now and then because I do not fit in. I have a bicycle and the road is not made for me. And I feel it's okay to leave situations that aren't serving you, and it's okay to find a better fit, whether it's a new job, it's a new school, or even a new country. I'd also again like to recognize the privilege that I'm speaking with. The absence of, say, financial or social obstacles that someone listening to me right now may have, I recognize the difference that it makes, and I feel extremely grateful to have really important tags, the tag of my university, the tag that I'm an engineer or I do have some sort of experience. They do matter to people that interact with me, and they do matter to me too, because most of my interactions have been with people who whose community overlaps with these communities, the communities that come from my university or the field that I'm pursuing or the profession that I'm in. I think there is an overlap, and the positive side of it is that comes with a set culture of respect and learning. So I do have this extra agency within these communities, within these communities in general, to educate them because they're more open to learning. They do consider, my voice important. So that is a privilege. I do not have an obstacle. I do have agency to educate them, to clarify, and to actually come out as myself. I've just leveraged that privilege that I have, and I recognize it. I do recognize what it means to not have that. I'd also emphasize the importance of connecting with community, with a neurodivergent community, whether it's online or in person. Having people who intuitively get your experiences is so validating, and it's so nourishing. We're often made to feel like aliens, but in the right circles you'll see that you're not alone. And I strongly believe that what every human needs is a sense of belonging, irrespective of who you are, what your identities may be. We all crave, need, and we naturally seek as humans to belong. I think so. Finding your community is going to help you so much. It has helped me. It was the first step for me to find an online community and some random stranger telling me, hey, you might be autistic. And without that, I do not know if there was, if there could be another opportunity or seed, in my life. um, or I do not know if I would be speaking to you right now about so many things that I've discovered about myself, and so many things that are so helpful to people who are listening to me. And yes, definitely seek community in any way that you can, whatever is accessible to you. And I'm so thankful for the internet because it has increased accessibility greatly and very largely. When it comes to career paths, I would advise, aim for work that lights you up and it harnesses your innate talents. I do know it sounds very cliche, but the first step is just self awareness and external awareness. Being aware, I did learn very recently that neurodivergent individuals are so self aware, and it makes so much sense. The key is to just leverage it, to just utilize it for the best, to utilize it to improve your quality of life. And what I mean by external awareness is to religiously document and also religiously seek feedback that matters, feedback from true teachers, from true friends, your family, people that care about you, because it matters a lot. It's just very life changing to see yourself through eyes that care, that genuinely care for you. And to just put these two together, the self awareness and the external feedback that you get, and mapping it to your life, your past, your lived experiences, because that's how you can concretely say, hey, this is who I am, these are my skills, these are my talents, these are my needs, these are my wants, and this is who I want to be. That is where most people, I think, get confused when I say you need to be yourself. It's more about being aware of who you are and also who you want to be, and mapping it out the right way. Just remember that you're not alone. There is so much support. You just have to ask for it. And trying to force yourself into this successful professional stereotypical box is just a recipe for burnout and misery. The goal is to find that sweet spot, to strategize the right way where you're fulfilling your I don't know, your responsibilities or your duties, but you're also being valued for who you are. You're also being valued for your particular, idiosyncratic genius. I think that is the key to life, just finding that sweet spot, which is not impossible. I am a living example of it. And if I could just go back and talk to myself and give my younger self some advice, I would just say, just trust your intuition about what you need, and do not let others convince you otherwise. That would be the advice that I would give myself.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that answer, and especially the points about, I guess, self-awareness and neurodivergent individuals and also getting feedback. I think those are really really excellent points. The last question on the list, and one that I'm especially interested to hear your answer to, is what are some ways in which you would like to see the neurodiversity movement become more inclusive of people from various cultural backgrounds? And so kind of part two of that question, are some of the barriers that neurodivergent individuals face in employment culture specific? Uh,
So the neurodiversity movement can for sure become more inclusive of people who come from various cultural backgrounds. um, I think the number one thing is to amplify diverse voices. We should actively seek out and elevate the experiences and perspectives of neurodivergent individuals who come from various different identities or who come from various backgrounds. This includes promoting leaders or speakers or content creators from underrepresented and marginalized communities. I think just this is just a long-winded way of saying, hey, we need to recognize intersectionality and the fact that this movement and this community overlaps with so many other social movements and communities that are underrepresented and marginalized who also face the same kind of oppression. I think it's essential to acknowledge that individuals may face, multiple intersecting forms of marginalization based on their race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, social economic status, and so many other factors that we may not be aware of. It can be really easy to be, to have this tunnel vision or to just be narrow minded when talking about one movement, but it's so much more important to recognize how it's overlapping with so much else. Everything today is interdisciplinary. Everything, be it science, engineering, tech, social, everything is so tied together. Everything is intertwined, and it's so important to acknowledge that. And I also think the movement should address these intersections, and work to dismantle systemic barriers that affect disproportionately, in fact, neurodivergent people from marginalized communities. There are so many barriers regarding accessibility or just related to education in general. And yeah, it can be so difficult when when that is not recognized by the individual who is in that intersection. And we are so privileged, I would say. There are, we don't have so many obstacles because we're talking right now about this in so much detail, but there are people who do not have that education or who just do not have accessibility in general. And the other part I would say is culturally responsive resources, developing and disseminating information, resources, support services, whatever that may be, that are culturally relevant and that are, culturally accessible to neurodivergent individuals from these different backgrounds is so important. This may involve, translating materials to another language, multiple languages, or collaborating with community leaders and organizations and incorporating culturally specific and culturally sensitive, examples and perspectives, which I see which I see a lack of in so many resources. Um, just because I am an international student who knows how to read and write in English and is, say, in the US, where there's more tolerance and more acceptance, comparatively, I can access so many resources that someone else who isn't like me cannot. And that to me is just so hard to digest because I really cannot do much about it. I really wish there was something in place systematically, and also sustainably, some sustainable system that can help individuals irrespective of just their identities, I guess, no matter the language they speak or the culture that they come from. And it's also super, I wouldn't say invisible, I guess. people are aware of when they're putting these resources and support services in place, that they cannot cater to everyone. They cannot always be culturally sensitive, because it's mostly just one type of, or just like one um, type of person or one set of people making these resources, who may not necessarily be sensitive to everything else, especially culturally. And I guess I'm in a very interesting space that way, because I have my cultural differences, but I also have my neurological differences. And to me, it's so interesting to be in that, space where I'm overlapping with different communities, and I see the gap between them, and I just cannot sit, peacefully just seeing that gap. I really have this desperate need to bridge that gap. And it also surprises me that people do not realize it. People, when talking about neurodiversity, only realize the neurological difference and not the other differences. So just having culturally responsive and culturally sensitive resources is going to change so much for people. And I think this also includes cross cultural dialogue, encouraging open and respectful conversations, and understanding how neurodiversity is understood and experienced in, like, maybe different cultural contexts, different countries, different regions, different religions, I think. And then creating safe spaces for people to share their stories, to share their challenges and also successes. That is also so less talked about. I think that is also a huge part of this cross cultural dialogue, is a huge part of being responsive and sensitive. And I would say the last thing, because I could go on about this for decades. I think the last thing would be inclusion in research, and inclusion, ensuring that research on neurodivergence includes participants from different cultural backgrounds, different, identities that they carry, and also ensuring that the research is very much aware of these differences, and also aware of, also respectful of how these findings are interpreted and applied, in culturally sensitive ways. I think that's a huge part that most research misses, as far as I know. And just advocating for policies and practices that take into account the needs and perspectives of these people from, different spaces. I think that is so important. Ah, a longer answer, when talking about, culture specific barriers, um, especially in employment. I think it's important to realize that expectations and norms around communication, social interaction, and behavior can vary significantly across cultures. For example, eye contact, which I talk a lot about. So, in Western cultures, direct eye contact is seen as a sign of respect and confidence. But in many other cultures, prolonged, eye contact can be considered rude or aggressive and disrespectful. So, for neurodivergent individuals who come from, a different culture, who may struggle with eye contact, navigating these unspoken, norms and these differing expectations can be very, very challenging, especially when you're also trying to figure out yourself. You're also trying to, survive on this highway road with a bicycle. When you're trying to just survive as a human, I think it becomes all the more challenging to research and navigate something that you cannot make sense of. Everything is unspoken, and everything is so different in different spaces. And cultural differences in communication styles, such as, how direct you can be or how indirect you can be, the level of formal communication you need, that also can impact how you are perceived, whether in a personal space or a professional space. It does impact your relationships in both personal and professional spaces a lot. And it's so hard because you do not know what you have done wrong or how you could have done better. There's no feedback. You really don't get any feedback on, things that mattered, but people do not want to address, just like eye contact. And so, neurodivergent traits can be seen as blunt or informal in one cultural context, but they may be interpreted entirely different in an differently in another. And I think it's just super difficult that unwritten, unspoken norms and rules around networking, talking, or anything, relationship building vary in so many different ways. They are different. They are difficult in themselves, and then it's a whole new set of problems when you are in a different space with different kind of people who probably don't look like you, or who probably do not have the same, language or religion or whatever it could be. And so, yeah, when norms are heavily emphasized and valued, culture plays a huge role in, I guess, increasing your challenges and making life more difficult for you. And it's so much more important to educate people around this intersectionality and not just neurodivergence.
Oh, thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. And um, yeah, I just really appreciate all of your time and all of your answers and willingness to yeah, be interviewed. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam.